Today's interview with Brian BJ Kang is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/OCG. That's audibletrial.com/OCG. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Overcoming Graduation with Brian Drury. Today my guest is another Brian by the name of Brian Kang, who is a business strategist, sales and marketing consultant, and a coach. Now Brian, like many of the guests I've had on this show and many of the people listening, has dealt with deep depression in his life, and it started all the way back in high school. Now I know every person has dealt with depression at some point or another, but Brian was really deep down in it, and it carried over into his college years, where he found himself clutching at things like drinking and partying, attempting to fill the void inside, but it never was enough to fill up what he didn't even know he was trying to fill. He realized later he was just really disconnected with himself, and his biggest hurdle at that point in his life was that he didn't know how to ask for help. He was surrounded by friends and loved ones, but couldn't bring himself to say that four-letter word, H-E-L-P. During this time, he gained between 30 and 40 pounds, was financially broke, and everything hit an all-time low in 2008. He found himself looking in the mirror and did not like what he saw. He was blaming everything but himself for a situation, and he felt totally lost. Until one day, he finally asked for help. He realized that reaching out is not a weakness, but actually a massive strength. And through therapy and self-care, Brian was able to retake control of his life, lose the weight, and build deep confidence in himself. Brian is now a business strategist, sales consultant, marketing consultant, and coach. He's also owned many of his own businesses in a variety of different industries, which you'll hear about in today's interview. And his mission is to help you bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. In today's interview, Brian will discuss the importance in asking for help, especially for men who feel they can't because of societal pressures, how they were raised, etc. Why he left a six-figure per year sales job to strike out on his own. What he did to become a better member of society at the darkest time in his life. 2 things that everyone can do to massively improve the results and joy in their life. His most important piece of advice for anyone trying to make a sale. How he started multiple businesses and what was the key difference between his early businesses and his current business that has led him to even greater success and fulfillment. How he pulled himself out of debt when his back was against the wall to create financial stability in his life. How to deal with rejection in sales and in life. Why a flash forward is so important and how you can use it to get on the right track today, and why we should all become detectives in our past, and so much more. Now, as always, if you'd like to learn more about Brian, you can visit his website at brianjkang.com. That's BrianJKang.com, which of course is linked in the show notes. And also there is a link to connect with Brian on Facebook, so you can tell him what was your favorite part of today's episode or what was the most insightful piece that you got from hearing his story today. So guys, without any further ado, thank you for joining me today, and let me introduce you to Brian Kang. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Overcoming Graduation. It's great to be back with you guys after a little bit of a hiatus or some time for self-care and digging into some other parts of Overcoming Graduation. But today I'm very excited to have my guest Brian Kang. So Brian, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. I'm honored to be able to share a little bit of my story.
I'm so excited to hear it, especially after I saw what you put in your email. I always, when people give the highlight or the bullet point version, I always know how much more depth there is behind it. And for me, that's part of the exciting and engaging part of having a podcast, is being able to dive deeper in, because in that depth, in the pain, in the struggle, that's where a lot of our truth and our connection comes from. So I'm really excited to get into this, especially because you were recommended by a wonderful new friend in both of our lives, Matt Marr, who I had on the show recently and is just a wonderful person. So when he recommended you to me, I was like, I'm sure we're gonna get along great. But
yeah, Matt's a great guy, and I'm glad he was able to connect us. And yeah, I like to go deep, so I mean, I'm willing to share my story as a source of other people hopefully gain some inspiration out of it.
Mm-hmm. And we appreciate that too, especially on this show. I want to make sure the people that are sharing are ones that are willing to be real. I don't want the people that come on the show and say, I've got everything figured out and follow my 5 steps and everything will be perfect all the time. I want people who are going to say, it's not always going to be perfect, but you have so much more ability to control and guide your life than you realize. So, all right, less of me talking and more of your story. So as I told you in pre-show, normally what we'll do is dive in at, let's say, college graduation or wherever the person was taking the first step into their real world. But I know your story has roots even earlier, back when you were in high school. So can you tell the listeners a little bit about what your life looked like at that point and what you were going through in your high school years?
Yeah, so right around, I'm going to go back to 1997 when I was about a sophomore in high school here in Alameda, California. I was well liked by my peers. I was just a happy-go-lucky young man, going through life. Had aspirations to go to college, hopefully UC Berkeley up in Berkeley, here in Northern California. Mm-hmm. And I just had this ability to connect with people. And I was, like I said, I was happy. And then right around senior year of high school, around 1999, for some reason in my life, it took a little bit of a nosedive into just feeling I was very angry. I was very depressed. My anxiety, which is something I dealt with as a younger child, but it really kicked in right around senior year of high school. And so right as I was transitioning into going to college at UC Davis, right around 1999 as well, I hit a really, really low point in my life where I just felt so just down, and I lost a lot of confidence and self-esteem, and it was just a really, really difficult time of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that I think it's fascinating to do these interviews, because the more people I interview, the more I hear a consistent story of people struggling, especially at middle school and high school are very tough years. There's a lot of desire to understand and a lot of areas where we feel like we don't know who we are. There's this deep desire to know, but we don't even know where to begin. And that can often lead to depression because we feel like everyone else out there has it figured out. Like, oh, look at those people. They're succeeding. They're happy. What's wrong with me? But the reality is everyone, to some degree and to some extent, has these feelings of uncertainty and of doubt. So you had these feelings, you had this uncertainty and this depression. Can you tell us how that continued to evolve in college?
Yeah, well, we all know in college you get a little bit more freedom.
Yeah.
And so that could be a really positive and good thing. Or if you're already struggling and going through some tough times, it could just amplify it. And so I went to UC Davis 1999, and it went down. I went down even further down into a deeper depression, and I went into just partying a lot. In college, you start to clutch and grab things when you really feel that discontent inside of yourself. And so one of the major problems I've just looking and reflecting back was I had all these issues, and yes, I was depressed, and I thought everyone else had it figured out, but I was alone in the sense that I had all my friends around me, and I had resources around me for help. But I chose not to ask for help because I really didn't even know how to ask for help, because at the time I didn't even really know that I was depressed until looking back. And so, college, I was looking for that sense of belonging. I was drinking a lot. I was just partying a lot. And I just lost so much more confidence in myself because, drinking is just a mask, right? It's just, and I'm not saying like for some people it's fine. Drinking is you drink socially, that's all right. But for me, it was really just a source of me wanting to escape my feelings. I wanted to escape reality. I didn't want to be in my own shoes, in my own body. And so I really went into a further depression of just, I gained a lot of weight. They say the freshman 15, I probably gained like 30, 40 pounds. Wow. At my heaviest, I was probably 235 pounds. Right now I'm like 190, so that's like my natural weight. So I was unhealthy in mind, body, and spirit, just all the way across.
And I really want the listeners to hear what Brian just said about masks and about covering, because there's a big difference between I'd like to enjoy a beer with my friends, or I'd like to have a drink because I enjoy it and I like the flavor, versus who am I? What is life about? Why don't I feel good enough? Why do I feel inadequate? And then as all of these big, scary questions start creeping up, rather than face them, dive into them and work through them, which is hard, but is so much more valuable and actually helps you get some clarity and find yourself. We push it away. We use pornography, we use alcohol, we use drugs, and we use all these things because it takes us out of our moment. And Brian, I love the way you said it, of not wanting to be in your own body. We all feel this sensation of, oh man, I'm not good enough as I am, and if people saw me, that's why we put on the mask. If people saw that real, vulnerable, scared person, they would never love and accept me. So we feel not good enough, and rather than work on those feelings, work on ourselves, work to build our self-esteem and our confidence, and work to challenge those negative limiting beliefs, we often will self-medicate in some ways or distract. And that can be even TV. That can be any number of things. So for all the listeners, really pay attention, because whenever those times come up of difficult challenges, of thoughts that keep recurring that you're afraid to deal with, of bad memories, I know it's scary, but like Brian said, this is so critical. Get help, whether that's a book, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a coach. There are people out there that want to help you through this, and I want you to know you're not alone. So I love the way you went through that, Brian, because I think that fundamental understanding of distracting versus enjoying, there's a big difference between watching a movie because you really love it versus putting on a movie because you don't want to think about other things in your life. And if we don't take that time to think about what we really want to do, we're just going to end up coasting and going on autopilot. So you said you were in college, things are getting worse and worse and worse. So can you tell us about the journey from putting on 30 to 40 pounds, being overweight, lost and scared, and masking depression? What was the tipping point, or the thing that changed that put you in a much more positive direction in your life?
It was right around 2008 when I hit this low bottom point of just looking at myself in the mirror and just seeing. And again, I don't want to make this like if you gain weight, you're a bad person. It just was not my natural weight. Right? But I looked in the mirror and I was just a mess. Just looking at my eyes, there was just this anger. I was angry as well, right? From just masking my feelings. I was this angry person that was blaming everything except for really looking within. I was blaming how society was structured. Oh, I had to go to college. I didn't even really want to go to college, and I went to college, and the educational system failed me because they didn't, I didn't have enough good mentors. I was all alone, and so I was blaming everybody else. And in 2008, that was the moment where I was like, you know what, I'm the solution to this problem, right? I have to really take back control of my life. In order to do that, I need to ask for help. And that's really what I want to tell the listeners out there as well, is that, and I think you also said it also, that, really asking for help in one way or another is not a sign of weakness, especially for men out there. A lot of times as men, we feel like we have to put up this machismo, we can't show our feelings. And I think it's my mission now to really tell men out there that, hey, I don't care how much of a macho guy you are, if you don't drop into your feelings and feel exactly what's going on and try to mask it with your anger and your whatever else it is, the things that you mentioned as well, Brian, that you're clutching for, you're really going to come to a point of breaking point, and it's going to come out in other ways, whether it's anger, whether it's other things that could, other negative things that come outside of that comes outside of your life. Really what I did was I asked for help at that point. And so I did a lot of the things that you mentioned. I saw a therapist for the first time, which was really, really weird and scary at the beginning. But it was something that really changed my life in a positive direction, because I actually was able to talk about anything and everything that was going on inside of my head instead of just being alone. And it was the act of asking for help. And then I was financially broke at that time also in 2008. I was working for real estate, a mortgage loan. I was a loan officer for mortgages, and the housing market crashed in 2008. Negative, all of this stuff hit me at once. And so I realized that I had to, get back on track in terms of my career, my health, started eating better, started working out, playing a lot more basketball, and really that was the point in 2008. So asking for that help was the main thing that I did.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like what you said is in that time leading up to it, it was the victim mentality was feeling very strong. Would you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely. Just self-pity, victimization, angry at the world. All those things I experienced.
Mm-hmm. And for everyone listening, that is something we all experience at some point, and this is a really tough thing to accept at times, because when you accept your power to own your happiness and own the course of your life, then that means you can't blame anyone else anymore. So we all have times in our life where, like Brian said, blaming school, blaming the government, blaming the system, blaming this, because we think it's a lot easier to point the finger somewhere else, because then it takes away our responsibility. But inside, there's a voice that's crying out and saying, but you could change it, but you could make things different for you, and we often will ignore that. So it so frequently takes us just getting out of our own head and having that conversation with someone else. But I loved what Brian said. It wasn't just sitting down with the therapist. It was getting out with friends and playing some basketball, getting physically active, taking control of the things that you can control. I love in Byron Katie's book, she says, Loving What Is, she says there's 3 types of business. There's God's business, their business, and your business. And when you're in God's business and their business, you're in things you can't control. When you get into your business and you focus on doing everything you can to make your business the best it can be, that's when life in the world starts to change. So can you tell us a bit about that evolution, Brian? Because anyone who's dealt with depression in their lives, there have been times where I felt depressed, I felt lost, I felt scared. And then when things turn around, you start to be like, wow, how did I see the world the way I did before? So can you tell the listeners a little bit about how life started to change, and then what other things like in your career began to shift as a result of this focus on self-care?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it really was, I think the main thing was I was just a better member of society. I know that sounds kind of broad, but I was a better, boyfriend to my girlfriend at the time, who's now my fiance. I was just a happier person to be around, less angry. I was a better friend. I was a better son. I was a better brother to my sister. I was a better grandson to my grandmother. It's tough, right? When you first make big shifts in your life, you want that magic pill. You want to swallow it and everything's going to be solved. But it's really, looking back, it's really that daily progression, right? The daily new habits you have to start forming in your life, whether that's waking up in the morning and working out, or whether it's journaling, or whether it's reading more books and listening to more podcasts. All those things is is kind of my road to finding myself, or whatever you want to call it, or finding who my authentic self is, as that search continues on and on all the time. Even right now, there's still that search for who's my authentic self, right? That's really what I've been working on right now. But it's not easy, right? It's not easy when you first take the step in terms of making changes in your life. But, for anyone listening out there, there is no magic pill, right? And I think you talk about this on your website as well, Brian. When you're coaching people, there's no magic pill out there, right?
Right.
You have to take action. You have to take those little daily tweaks in your life. You have to start setting healthy boundaries and, things like that. Those are the things that you have to do in order to make those small incremental changes, which is like the compound effect, as Darren Hardy says, right? Those small incremental changes will actually build upon larger, changes. So this is great, because this is almost like a time capsule for looking back in terms of the depression, how I got myself out of it. Because now that I'm out of it, and I feel like I have that self-care routine, and I'm very, very, I protect that. I protect my thoughts and my body with as best as I can. But looking back, I just realized now I can look back and really see all the changes that I made for the positive, and how natural it is for me now. But it's not an overnight fix. So anyone listening, just keep grinding. Start with something small that you can get that victory under your belt, and then really just build upon that.
Absolutely, 100%. And one of the key things I want to emphasize there as well is what you said is setting healthy boundaries. And actually, I need to pause right now, Brian, because a guest that comes by on our show is visiting, and that is Donna. So for anyone who is a new listener to this show, I live right near the train tracks. There she is. There it is. All right.
What's up, Donna?
So Donna is the train that comes by almost inevitably every show. And ever since I improved my recording equipment, Donna was harder to hear, but now I've made some changes, so she's back. And for anybody who is new to the show, what Donna likes to do, thank you, Donna, it's nice to see you too. What she likes to do is promote my guests. So, Brian, can you tell the listeners a little bit and some of the places they can go to learn more about you and the amazing work that you do?
Sure. I think the best place to reach out to me is brianjkang.com. That's my website. You can see a little bit more about my story. You can see the podcast that I've also started about 7 months ago as well. As of October 2016, this is when we're recording. And so that's the best place to reach out to me. There's a contact me page as well. I would love to hear from you, just see what's going on in your life, what you're working on. And that's brianjkang, KANG.com.
And as always, listeners, that will be included in the show notes. So thank you, Donna. We appreciate it. It's good to have her back.
Thanks so much, Donna.
So one of the things that you mentioned was setting healthy boundaries, and you talked about self-care. And these are two things I don't think we can emphasize enough on this show, because it is not something you hear in our regular education, in our school systems. It's not like, unless you have that one teacher who gets it, that one teacher who has done the work themselves, most people are almost unaware of this. So one guy's setting healthy boundaries. If you heard Brian say he became a better human being, a better boyfriend, a better grandson as a result of making these changes, we often think, especially if you're a very giving person, that we need to give everything we have all the time because that's what you're supposed to do. But then there's nothing left in the tank for you. By setting healthy boundaries and, like he said, really protecting that self-care, you're able to fill your own tank so you can give more. Because a good example is if I'm going to hang out with my girlfriend after this podcast, but if I said, oh, I'm not going to do the podcast, and I'm not going to do my coaching calls, and I'm not going to do my workouts so I can spend all my time with her, I would not be the fullest expression of myself to be a better boyfriend for her. And I would, and that's something where that can bleed into relationships where somebody gives up something they love without the partner asking, and then ends up feeling contempt to them later as a result of it. So that concept of set healthy personal boundaries, it's okay to say no and take care of you, and then really protecting that self-care, whatever you need to do, whether it's meditation, taking a hike, whatever those things are for you, try out different things, because the right things, when you do them, trust me, you'll know. So, Brian, so you go from this state in 2008 where you hit rock bottom, you take control back into your life, you start setting healthy boundaries, start prioritizing self-care, and then you moved into a new job. So can you tell the listeners a little bit about what that transition was like?
Yeah, so I was doing loans for a small boutique brokerage firm for mortgages and all that, and I moved into health insurance sales. So it was something I'm really proud of, actually. Looking back, because I was at a low point in my life. I was overweight. I was unhealthy, and like I said, mind, body, and spirit. And I started from scratch. Basically, it was a non-salary job. It was really for me to prove that I can get myself out of a rut. I was also in debt for maybe about $15,000 in debt or so. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, that was the moment where I really said, you know what, this is how I'm going to prove to myself that I can get myself out of this. And it wasn't overnight again. I went through another period of like, how am I going to do this? But I just started hitting the streets, literally. Like I went door to door, knocking on doors, selling health insurance, business to business. And I built up my client base from 0 to 100 in maybe like a year, a little bit over a year, maybe a year and a half or so. Mm-hmm. And it just by pure hustling and also having better habits in my life. And I was very proud of myself at that time, like I said, because really what that was is it was one of the proudest moments where I can say, hey, my back was like completely against the wall. I was in $15,000 of debt, but all I did was I used a new method of and this actually works. I was honest and I had integrity, and I just would connect with people at their businesses and help them, and started to think of sales as an attitude of service, and not just like I'm going to get this person's money or get the close the deal. And so shifting away from that mindset, I was able to build up my book of business and start to build myself up. And then after that, I actually went off and started my first company ever, which was an insurance company, which is still around, but I'm not very active in it. But I really made my first leap into what I was, which was my truth, was I always want to be an entrepreneur and own my own business. And so I started my own health insurance brokerage as well, which lasted probably only about 7 or 8 months, like really diving into that business, but it's still around to this day, and I still get a little bit of income from there. But I was just more proud of the way I went from being broke and unhealthy to this point of taking back control of my life and self-care, and then also building up my book of business and started my first business.
Right. And what I love that you talked about there is there's a variety of things that are critical. Is that by taking care of yourself, you were willing to take bigger bets and push yourself and get out your comfort zone. When you're taking care of your health and you're exercising, you're pushing your mind, body, and spirit, you're more apt and able to push yourself in other areas. So you went, you pushed, you grinded, and then you also listened to your inner voice that said, hey, this is going really well, but there's something else that we're called and meant to do. So you started that entrepreneurial endeavor on the side. That's what I'm doing with my business, because I was like, same as you, I graduated with massive debt coming out of school. I had $80,000 in student loans. And I said, well, how can I find a job that I love, that enables me to travel, that really engages and excites me and gives me the time to build this thing on the side? So for everyone listening, stop asking yourself how you can do one versus the other, and start asking yourself how you can bring all of your unique talents and gifts into the way you live your day-to-day life. And Brian, before we go on to the next phase of your story, I know the only time I've ever really done it is when we sold these little gift cards as a fundraiser for football back in high school and middle school. But I know door-to-door sales is one of the hardest things to do out there. Like, we talk about dealing with rejection and all of that, but face-to-face, shaking hands, meeting people door-to-door. Can you share with the listeners some of the best lessons you learned from doing door-to-door sales?
Yeah, that's good. So really the couple of tips or things that I learned from that is that, come from an attitude of service, as I said before, of how can I help this person? I would say also connect with that person. Don't just look at them as a prospect or someone that's just going to be another client, but someone that you can really serve, and that they're another human being. And a lot of the people I was dealing with and working with were small business owners, so they had families, they have their story behind the business, why they started their business. And I went to all sorts of businesses, manufacturing companies, I went to accountants, CPAs, lawyers, I worked with dentists, so it was a wide range of people, but really trying to connect with the person on an emotional level instead of looking at them as a prospect. And then also how to deal with rejection, because as we know, and I would actually say, door-to-door sales is actually, you'll get less rejection doing that, or I guess less aggressive rejection doing that than if you're inside sales on the phone, because I've done both. And part of the last job I left was mostly phone sales and inside sales. But the reason for that is because when you do door-to-door sales and you meet someone in person, most people, they're not rude. Most people, it's all in our heads that these people are going to treat us like badly, and they're going to slam the door in our face and kick us out of the office. That rarely happened. They would get annoyed at times, and I can see it in their body language, in their face. But really, it's about overcoming that rejection in terms of, hey, they're not interested, and so you just move on. It's just like a metaphor for life. You just basically take the rejection, and then the quicker you can bounce back and have that resilience, that's that little marker of success, right? If you stew and you stay in that rejection and you want to go back home and you don't want to keep driving around, you don't want to go door to door anymore, that's really what's going to be, quitting this. That's really what's going to lead to quitting sales. Whereas if you really stay resilient and you just accept that rejection, that's the moment where you can really be successful and start building up your book of business if you're doing outside sales or any type of sales.
Right, and learning and for any of the listeners, if you want to reframe it to another context, if you've never worked in sales, pretty much everyone listening to this show has dated or tried to date at some point. we all have friends, or we've all been that person at some point that went out, tried once to go on a date, failed, and I was like, well, that just doesn't work, and it's like that. I'm not even going to try anymore. I'm not even going to make the effort. Versus the person who continues to go for it and gets hurt sometimes, and sometimes has the ups and downs. But that's ultimately how they learn about themselves, what they like and what they don't, and come to find someone that really aligns with who they are. And I really want, for especially anybody who's considering sales or entrepreneurship, to listen to what Brian is saying, because this is such powerful advice. Because when you focus on building a relationship, like many people are saying, oh, I don't want to be salesy and I don't want to be the sleazy car salesman stereotype. The way to get around that is do exactly what Brian is saying, is build a relationship. Because once you have a relationship, you know what they need and what you offer. And if they're not a good fit, you can say, hey, we're not meant to work together. That's okay. Wish you the best. Here's someone I'd recommend for what your needs are. But if they are a good fit, then all of a sudden you are filling a need that they have, and you can help them solve a problem in their life. And if you think about some of the main problems in your life right now, if somebody said, hey, pay me $100 and I'll make sure that that's taken care of and that's never a problem again, most of us would be like, hell yeah, absolutely, because you're solving a problem instead of forcing a product on somebody who doesn't really need or want it. So, Brian, I love where this is going, and I also know the next step is unconventional for a lot of people, but on this show it's all about the unconventional, and that's what I love. So you've got a high-paying sales job. You're one of the top sales reps. You're crushing it, and a lot of people would say, Brian, man, you've got it. It's locked up. You're taking care of yourself. You're getting things done at work, and now you can just coast, right? Like his life's just about getting to the coasting spot. Yeah. But you said, I'm called to do something greater. So can you tell the listeners a little bit about what that calling was and what your first steps out into that were?
Yeah, sure. So after the door-to-door sales, I went to different sales capacities from everywhere, from anything like I was doing luxury retirement home sales. And then my most previous 9-to-5 corporate job was selling real estate software to real estate brokers and agents and teams. And yeah, I was making $150,000 a year. I don't say that to boast, but that was something that was always a goal of mine to get to that 6 figures.
Right.
And I always wanted to get to that number. And I was there, and I could have just, like you said, coasted, and I could have stayed at my job, or I could have advanced through the ranks, or I could have left for another sales job in once you're in high-tech sales and you're making 6 figures, and as long as you still have your mouth and your brain, you're good to go for you can go for years. But what happened was I did a flash forward into my life, and I think Stephen Covey talks about this best in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is begin with the end in mind. And he actually has an exercise where you actually write out your eulogy of what you want people to say in your eulogy, and talks about that's about character and what kind of person you want to be. And for me, when I was flash forwarding in my life, I knew that I wanted to do something greater, and I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I had tried it with the health insurance company, but it didn't quite work out because I didn't have my heart in health insurance. I wasn't passionate about it. But I always felt this passion for helping other people, and especially people that are feeling stuck in their lives in regards to their career. So similar to your message, Brian. I mean, there's people that they have that greater calling in their life, but it's so I guess covered up with fear and stability, which that's exactly where I was at as well. But I realized that it was really now or never. And I was 34 years old at the time when I quit, and I was like, you know what? I'm not getting any younger. I have a little bit of money saved up, so I had that safety net. But I really had no real solid plan other than I'm just going to quit so I can put my energy into this business full force. And I could have built another business on the side again, but at this point in my life, I really needed to, burn the bridges behind me. They talk about you go to battle and then you burn the bridges behind you once you land on the shore, because then you really have no choice but to succeed. And so I really just had to burn those metaphorical bridges. Not in a mean way. I do a Jerry Maguire thing where I'm in the office, but it was a very amicable, I guess, split, if you want to call it. And I just had to follow this calling of coaching and starting a business and starting a podcast. I knew that I wanted to inspire other people, and so I just did it. I made the leap, and I'm figuring it out as I go. It's not perfect, but it's perfect for me right now in this moment, and I'm figuring out as I go, and it's going well now. It's starting to, I see some fruits of my labor, which is awesome.
That's fantastic. And that what I love what you just said, doing the best thing for you right now. Because when we try to get caught up in the perfect step and the perfect thing, I find when I do that, that's when I'm trying to procrastinate. Let me just figure out everything and read every book before I take a step. And the example I use for other people, and I need to throw it myself a lot of times, is if I want to learn to shoot a free throw or shoot a basketball, and I read every book and watch every YouTube video, I'm never going to learn until I get out and do it. So what I really want to emphasize for the listeners too, because I know this is a constant point of contention and people get really caught up in either you have to leap and be an entrepreneur or you have to be a corporate zombie. It's like either you have to just dive into uncertainty or get like something safe and secure that's not really fulfilling and not you. So if you listen to Brian's story, it's a perfect example of how that's not true at all. Brian worked and created fulfillment in his job. He tested entrepreneurship before, like several years before he dove into it full out. He created a successful business. He created revenue and health so that he had a bit of a cushion, a way that he could invest in his business more. It's a great example of how life is not nearly as black and white as we think and as we try to tell ourselves it is sometimes. So when you're willing to look at it differently and say, how can I experiment? How can I try that out? Because Brian, I'm sure from your first experience trying out entrepreneurship, you learned a lot of things you didn't expect to. And would you say those things helped you and set you up better for your next business?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the main thing for me, it was the passion that was missing, because I had the drive at the time. I had the motivation. I was ready to do it. But because I had no passion, it really didn't take off. And, I had built up a little bit of a book of business in my own health insurance business, but really what the missing piece was that passion. And so looking back, and I learned so much about systems as well, and LLCs and all the, that corporate, that legal stuff. So that now, as I'm building, businesses, hopefully multiple businesses, I'm working on other things, but it's really, I have a little bit something under my belt of studying and just really diving in there, right? And I did something about it.
Yeah, it's something that I think everyone else underestimates. Just how do you manage your finances? How do you have to classify as a legal structure? What types of reporting do you need to do annually? What types of fees are associated? It's, running a business has a lot of steps, guys, and it's not that it's impossible. It's like Brian and I are perfect examples. It's possible, and Brian has done it to even like much greater levels of success. I'm in my second year of running my first business, and it's something where it's possible, but you have to, one, like he said, have the mission that's worth fighting for, and then two, know that this is the right step for you, because there are a lot of people that entrepreneurship may not be the right step. They may want to work in a company that may fulfill their needs and wants, give them the life and the balance that they want, allow them to spend time with their families. Consider for yourself and be honest with yourself. It's so important, because when you lie to yourself, you end up living somebody else's fullest expression of what life is. When you're honest, you're willing to step in and say, this is what's right for me, and then go for it as hard and with as much love and passion as possible. So, Brian, I know the word passion is in our area, in our industry, especially in the coaching, can sometimes be a buzzword, and some people can overuse it, and many people have trouble defining it. I've heard lots of different explanations of how do you find or create your passion. So what would be the advice you would give to the listeners of Overcoming Graduation about how to either identify or create this passionate lifestyle that you've been able to create?
Yeah, I think you said it already a little bit, but it's really about the authenticity, right? What's true for you? For those of you listening out there, don't want my life, right? Maybe there's aspects of my life and my path and my business that stand out to you. I would take whatever you hear and what feels alive for you and make it your own. Become authentic with that. And one of the things that I do with my clients is to go backwards, right? Figure out when you were younger, what are the things that you were really, really passionate about, and what are the things that made you feel alive, whether it's in your body or it just gives you that sense of euphoria, or like the times where you're in the zone. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do that thing now. So like, let's say you want to be a basketball player when you're younger, or a baseball player when you're on the diamond. You just felt amazing and time stopped and you were just in your best element. But there could be something similar to that. Maybe it's something connected to the outdoors. Like maybe for you, a 9 to 5 is not your calling or is not what you want to do. Maybe you want a job that the thing that you loved about being outdoors when you were a kid, or playing baseball when you were a kid, was the outdoor aspect of it. So you start to become a detective and you start to investigate, looking backwards in terms of, hey, what are those clues, are the things that really made me feel alive and why? Going layers into why you were passionate about that, and then being able to utilize that to say, hey, what are the things I can do now? Maybe experiment with certain things. Again, doesn't mean you have to dive straight into doing that thing. I think people immediately assume that if they follow their calling in life, or they find a work that's more suitable for them, that they have to go from step 1 to step 30 right away.
Right.
No, you go from step 1 to step 2. Maybe you research online. Maybe the third step is you start talking to 5 people that in the field you want to talk to. So really not choosing like other person's what they want for you, but really looking inside first rather than grasping for that external job that's going to solve all your problems. And I think that as a society we do that. We were talking about that earlier. We grab for the external. We grab for alcohol or sex or pornography or gambling or anything out there, when really what we need to do is we need to start looking within, and we need to see, hey, what are my values? What did I love doing when I was a kid? And then from there, once you build up that, I guess, dossier, whatever you want to call it, of yourself, then you start taking the little bits of action and understand that's not going to happen overnight.
Fantastic. I love that, because you're the first person on the show to ever say be a detective within yourself. I love that idea, because it really does take some digging to say, what are the things that used to really light me up and really give me that fire? And then also to even go another level there is to say, and why did I step away from them? What stories did I start telling myself that pushed me away? What things did I start to accept that didn't align with who I was, that pushed me away from that and made me believe I couldn't make that happen? And it's so interesting how we have these things that work for us, make us happy and bring us joy, but we were talking about this just before the interview, that we can push ourselves away from it. And when I go inside and I look at why, there's fear of failure. There's also fear of success. What if I really crush it and life changes, and then I have to support people and there's people relying on me, and that's really what I want. But in those negative days when the imposter voice is the loudest, and when your internal critic is what Matt Maher calls it, like when he is speaking the loudest, or he or she, those are the moments where it's easy to just be like, you know what, you're right, I shouldn't try because I might fail, or I might succeed and then things might change. Let me just stay in my comfort zone. So now you've pushed out of your comfort zone, you've taken a leap into entrepreneurship, you're starting to see the fruits of your labor. So can you tell some of the listeners, because I know many of the people listening to this show are curious in starting their own entrepreneurial endeavor in whatever that may be. So can you tell them some of maybe the top 2 or 3 things you would recommend if they want to start their own business? Maybe those are things that you didn't expect or anticipate, or just the best pieces of advice that you got in terms of how to start a business.
I'd say the first thing is learn as you go. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier about we get so caught up in reading everything and watching videos, and that stuff's important to do the research, but really getting in there and trying something and then failing, I think that's the most important thing. Like you get to the edge of whatever is the comfort zone of what you have, and it's scary. It feels like an insurmountable wall, but in order to really learn to see if that would work for you, you really need to take action and do something about it, because courses, online courses and learning, that stuff can overwhelm you and you can just get into analysis paralysis. But really the whole idea here is just to learn as you do, and then also realize that sales matters, right? In terms of, it doesn't mean you have to be a sleazy salesperson or you have to be, deceiving of any sort. I think when people hear the word sales, they immediately kind of cringe in their body, and you get that picture of someone that's just lying to you or deceiving you. But you have to start, really focusing on sales first, and that happens for my business, it's through conversations. You talk to people and you connect with them. and you see what's going on in their life, and you build that relationship, right? And you don't look at them as a prospective client, but you look at them as a human being, as to, hey, how can I serve them first? And then later on, maybe they can become a client, or you can offer services or a product to them. But sales matters, in any business. You have to have sales and you have to have clients, but at the same time, you have to first start from an attitude of serving, just as I, said earlier about, when you're going door to door, you have to, connect. That's pretty much it. But I could think of the top two things: that sales matters, and really to learn by doing, not by reading so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that I think my dad calls them seminar junkies. It's the people who go seminar after seminar and they go, that was life-changing, that was transformational. I have so many ideas, but never change a thing. And I've done that. I've gone to seminars and been all fired up and like, everything's going to change now. I'm a new Brian. And then I get home and I'm like, but let me just fall back into the exact same routines that got me where I'm at and, just keep doing things the same. But I've got great notes over in that book over there about what I could do differently. It's fascinating. But it takes that courage of being willing to let go of who we were to become who we've always wanted to be. That's a quote I heard that I love. But I loved how you said, these aren't clients, these are people. We forget that so much. We start looking at metrics. Like, that was something that started with me when I started my podcast. I started to say that I started to judge the worth of the show based off the number of downloads. And so if the downloads weren't always going up, I started to get mad or feel like, this isn't working, or something's wrong, so this isn't good. And then when I reshifted my thinking to each one of those downloads is a person. And that's a person that I have a chance to connect with and a chance to share either my ideas or my interviewees' ideas with, so that they could potentially benefit and live better. It's their people again, and you become excited about every single download, and it stops being, well, I didn't get this many this month, and it's the same thing with sales. I didn't get this many. But if you build deep, meaningful relationships, if you have people coming back to you saying, my life was forever changed because of you and the work that you do, that's incredible. That's something that many people may never hear in their life because they're not willing to do the work or get past their own fears. So really love the way you framed that, Brian. And I think we've come to a perfect time for the wrap-up questions. This time has flown by, but
yeah, it has, man.
but that's always, to me, that's a great sign, because that's a sign for me that I'm having a blast with it. And I'm like, I know the listeners, there's tons of valuable stuff in here, but really I'm like, my first goal is to make sure that my guest has fun and that we're both enjoying this process. So, for me, when it's flying by, I know I have to pay attention to the clock, so I have to be aware, but I'm like, oh man, it's going so fast, but this is really awesome.
Yeah, likewise, man. I'm excited for this these wrap up questions, man. Let's get into it.
Yeah, big, deep, powerful. We just want you to tell everyone the meaning of life and what. No. So, all right. So these two questions. The first one is a newer question. It's been around for a bit, but it's something my dad recommended, and then the second has been around since the beginning of the show. But because this show is geared towards young adults, millennials, whatever you want to call this age group, is what is the unique value that you believe millennials bring to the world? Because many young adults, especially those in like their early to mid 20s, believe that they don't have value because they're too young, they're too inexperienced, they're too immature. But you and I both know there's massive value, even for younger and younger than those ages. So what is the unique value that you think young adults and millennials bring to the world?
Wow, that's a great, Brian's dad, that's a great question.
Matt loves my dad too, so you're getting on the my dad boat.
Wow, that's such a loaded question. There's so much, I don't just say that, right? I just see so much hope in, I don't know, I guess I'm at the very, very outskirts of being a millennial, right? I was born in 1981. I think some people categorize it differently. But for the people out there, gosh, there's just so much there's so much opportunity. I guess that's more external, but for you all listening, that I think your unique value is really, I know it's just, I would just say like, you're great, you really are. Like, I have a deep sense of ability to see greatness in people, and I usually see greatness in almost every single person. And so I would say the millennials, you guys listening, I mean, I don't know how else to state this, but you have a lot to offer this world, right? You're great in whatever situation you are in right now. But I'd say that, nurture that potential, right? Most people were only working at, I don't know what the percentage is, but a very small percentage of what our actual potential is. But you have so much potential. You have the ability to know technology as well. I think that's a huge one. Like you grew up in the internet age, and some people say like, oh, that's terrible. Everyone's just looking at their phones, and I get it. It gets too much when we're just again checking out and not building relationships, but looking at our phone. But you all have the deep ability to connect the greatness that you already have inside of you, in terms of like using technology also. So utilize that. Don't let people tell you how to live your life, no matter who it is, whether it's your parents. I know that's controversial, but parents also have their own agenda, and they don't even know it, right? They want the best. They want the best for you, but that might not necessarily be your best. That might be what they think your best is, because it's their own belief and their own values. So nurture that greatness you have in you, and use technology because you grew up in the internet age, and don't let people think that the internet is a bad place.
I loved what you said about your ability to see greatness in people, and even people who don't see it in themselves, because guys, this circles back to a point we made very early in this interview. Sometimes the most beneficial thing about getting help is that someone else sees the greatness in you before you do. That's one of the most powerful things about coaching, therapy, and reaching out and connecting with other people is there are times, and I know we've all been through this, we've all had to talk to somebody at some point, but especially when you're feeling the lowest, don't be afraid to ask friends, family, loved ones, the people that you care about and trust, what they love about you. Like, we get so focused in being humble and not bragging that we end up not celebrating at all. So if you can't see your greatness, go to the people you trust and ask them. And if you don't feel like you have people close to you, start reaching out to coaches, start reaching out to people who are going to look at you honestly and tell you what they really see and how much power and greatness and joy and light that you have inside of you. Because everyone has something. Everyone has their own unique story. And even though we're conditioned to not believe that, if you're willing to step outside the box of what most people believe, you can find a life that is much more engaging and exciting. So absolutely love that, Brian. That was fantastic. Oh, and another piece that you said, be willing to disagree with people. Like, even if it's your parents, that's a hard thing for a lot of people, because they're like, well, my parents said this, I don't want to piss them off, I don't want to get in their way. But listeners, keep in mind, if someone is telling you you can't or you won't, in reality, what I really believe they're saying is that they don't believe they could. So rather than accept the possibility that you could, they'd rather say it's impossible, because you succeeding at something they decided they couldn't challenges their reality and their comfort zone. So really consider that, because doing big things, doing these things is scary. It's challenging. Sometimes people do get distanced, but keep in mind, if you're growing and developing into the person you've always wanted to be and always been inside, that you're working to let out, and people fall out of your life, those people aren't meant to be there. And you will connect with the people that share and celebrate you for all of your greatness. So, Brian, now on to the final question. Love that first answer. And so this one I think is especially powerful considering your story. And what this question is if you could go back to, generally the way I'll ask this is, if you could go back to college graduation, high school graduation, and give yourself advice, what advice would you give yourself? But I'm going to rephrase this to, when you were at the lowest point, when you hit bottom in your life, if you could go back knowing everything you know now and give your younger self advice, what would you say to younger Brian?
I would say stop caring what other people think so much, because I still struggle with this, but it's getting much better. But I would say that most of my life, a majority of my life, which is kind of sad to think about it, but I'm moving away from that now, is I cared too much what other people thought about me, whether it was my peers, whether it was society, whether it was my parents or family, because I didn't want to disappoint them and I wanted to please them. But that people pleaser stuff, you gotta throw that out the window. And I would tell younger Brian that hey man, you are great and you have a lot to offer the world, but you just have to show it all. And there's going to be people out there that don't like you, but you just have to do it anyways and just soldier on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Because oftentimes those people that don't like you for living in your fullest self, it's out of jealousy. It's out of they wish they could do it, but they don't have enough belief in themselves that they could. So rather than try and use that as motivation and say, oh, if he can do it, I can too, they want to try and tear you down. Say you're inauthentic. Say, oh, you don't have the certifications. Like, trust me, guys, people will, especially the bigger you get and the more notoriety you get, the more people will try to attack you and try to come at you. But that's where that prioritization of self-care and healthy boundaries is even more critical. If you learn those skills now, when things explode, you blow up, then all of a sudden you have ways to deal with these challenges and this stress. You have a strong, supportive group and network of people to help you through the tough times. Like, that's the thing, guys. Start building it now. Listen to all of the things Brian said about his journey and about really take that step now, because it's not, like he said, from step 1 to step 30. If you take step 1 today, you'll be excited. When you take step 2 tomorrow, it'll continue to build and grow. Doesn't mean you won't face challenges and face difficulties along the way, but momentum is so big in helping you create the life that you've always dreamed of. So Brian, man, fantastic. And first off, let me just thank you so much, because this has been so much fun, and I am so glad Matt connected the two of us for an interview.
Likewise, man. It was a great time. I appreciate your questions, and I know that you're a coach as well, just by the way you listen and you get it. I know that you see the greatness in other people as well, and it was just a great connection. So if you're listening out there, Matt, thanks so much for the connection as well. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Brian. I'm very honored to be able to share my story on your podcast.
He better listen to this after making the introduction. Otherwise, I'm going to have some words with Matt Maher. But before I let you go, man, because I think you and I could talk all night, but I know the listeners probably have food to eat or something like that. Where can I know Donna helped us out. Thank you so much, Donna, for helping you promote. But I want to make sure that the listeners can come find out more about you, because I'm sure after listening to this, they're going to want to hear and see more about what Brian Kang is doing. So what are some of the best places, your website and any other social media links that you want to share?
Yeah, I think the best place is still the website, Brian, BrianJKang, BrianJKang.com is the best place to connect with me. You can fill out a contact me form if you want to just shoot me an email. Let me know any thoughts that any bits of inspiration that you got out of this interview. And then, that's really the best place to connect. You can look for me on Facebook. Maybe I can send you a link later, Brian, but it's a little bit hard to find me. But it's Brian, BRIAN, and then BJ Kang. So BJ is my nickname, and then KANG as well on Facebook.
Perfect. Okay. For all the listeners, we'll have that in the show notes. So if you want to connect with Brian directly, as always, I highly recommend you reach out. You would not believe how few people actually will take the advantage of connecting with the people that I introduce you guys to on this show. And guys like Brian and me love that. We love to hear from listeners, and especially if you reach out to Brian, let him know that you heard about him on the Overcoming Graduation podcast. Not only would that be hugely exciting for me and for him, but we love to hear that people are listening and that they're engaging. And if you reach out, you might think, oh, I'm just going to go to like a spam folder or this or that. You'd be amazed. We answer. We actually respond back to these emails because we want to work with and support people that are willing to be different. And sending an email is often different than most people will do. So,
absolutely.
Listeners, thank you all so much for joining us today. That is going to be it for you. Brian, I'm going to ask you to hang out for a second. So, listeners, thank you again for joining us. Thanks for spending this time with us, and we'll be checking in with you again real soon. Well, guys, I'd have to say that my favorite part of today's episode, well, I actually had two favorite parts. One was when Brian talked about being a detective in your own past, and the other was when he talked about the importance of doing a flash forward in your life. Now, the reason I think that those two pieces are so critical is when you're a detective in your own past, you don't accept your first interpretation of an experience as the permanent reality, that this one thing was either good or bad or indifferent, and that's all it's going to ever be. When you are a detective in your own past, you're able to connect things that never seemed like they were going to connect. you're able to look back at things that were initially painful, challenging, maybe even traumatic, and see the beauty, the value, the gift that you were given by that challenge in your life. Now, on the flip side, the flash forward is an amazing tool to help us understand if we're on the right track right now with our day-to-day activities and our current reality to work towards the dreams and goals that we have in the future. The thing is, most people don't ever stop to do this. We just get so buried in our day-to-day work that we stop to think about where we're actually going. One of my favorite quotes is, "And if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there." So when we just have our heads down, imagine trying to navigate your way through a jungle with your head staring at the ground, just chopping at the leaves in front of you. If you never look up to see what's coming ahead of you, you'll never know if you're headed in the right direction towards the place you want to be. So a flash forward is very powerful because it lets you identify what it is you're working towards at this point in your life. And keep in mind that those goals are going to change. One of the biggest misconceptions I think that recent graduates or people in their early 20s have is that we have to identify this one thing that we want to work towards the rest of our life. The target is going to change. The goal is going to change. You're going to work towards something and achieve it and realize, okay, I'm here now. What next? And other times you're going to be working towards one goal and see a goal that fits you so much better, that fulfills you more, that is even greater. And that's a really powerful thing to check in with yourself, to look up, do a flash forward, and see if the steps that you're taking today are helping you move one step closer to what you want to do. So one of the best pieces of advice, I've heard this from several mentors, I think Cameron Harold was the first person I heard talk about this, is flash forward and then reverse engineer. So where are you trying to go? And start to backtrack. What do you need to do over the next 6 months to get there, over the next month, over the next week, over the next day? And then you can start taking action now towards a big, scary, monstrous dream. And those big, scary, monstrous dreams don't stay so big and scary when you're taking daily action towards it. So guys, that is all for today. Thank you all for joining me and Brian as well, for joining Brian and Brian. If you are new to Overcoming Graduation and want to learn more about the Overcoming Graduation family, you can visit overcominggraduation.com or check out OCG on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. On all of those, it's going to be the full name, Overcoming Graduation, with the exception of Twitter, which is @OvercomingGrad. If you would like to subscribe to the podcast, you can either click on the links in the show notes or search for Overcoming Graduation on iTunes or Stitcher. If you would be willing to share this out with your friends, your following, it would be a huge honor to me, and it also helps me to connect with even more people. So I would deeply, deeply appreciate that. And any ratings and reviews that are given in the iTunes store help to boost my show in the ratings so that I can reach even more people. So if you would be willing, I would deeply appreciate that. If you'd like to buy your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The First Step, and support My Team Triumph, a group that helps individuals with disabilities participate in endurance events, you can visit thefirststepgift.com to get your free book bonuses, as well as a link to buy your copy of The First Step either on Amazon or on Kindle. If you'd like to contact me directly for interview recommendations, to provide feedback on the show, or to just reach out and let me know what you thought, what you're thinking, what you'd like to see on the show, you can reach out to me at brian@overcominggraduation.com. And for everybody listening, a new product just launched by Overcoming Graduation this year is the Overcoming Graduation Rapid Language Learning Starter Kit and the Advanced Kit. So if you visit overcominggraduation.com/language, you'll be taken to a site where you get a free giveaway teaching you how to learn any Latin-based language in 90 days or less. And if you're interested in going deeper and investing even more time to make this dream a reality, you can purchase the Advanced Language Learning course, which will teach you how to learn to read, speak, and write a new Latin-based language in 90 days or less. That advanced program goes much deeper, has daily videos to help guide you along the process, help you get past some of the most common misconceptions that prevent people from learning a language, and helps you do something that most people don't believe is even possible. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you all for joining me today, and I'll be talking to you again very soon.